Hello, comrades, and welcome back to the Ushanka show. Today, as I promised, we're gonna talk a little bit about fishing in Soviet Union. And first of all, I would like to remind you that I'm just telling you this little tiny slice of about life in Soviet Union, just about my experiences. So it doesn't cover like the whole Soviet Union, how people fished in Siberia or Far East or anything else. This is just what I remember, because I'm trying to base my stories pretty much on my experience, because that's what the real life in Soviet Union was, and I think it's more important instead of reading something off internet and then retelling you. I just want to share what I did, what I experienced while living in Soviet Union from 1971 when I was born till 1991 when Soviet Union collapsed. Before we start my story about the Soviet Union, I actually would like to tell you a story about the United States, because that's when first time I realized the huge difference in whole fishing mentality and fisherman strategy in America versus Ukraine or Soviet Union. So if you follow my show, you may already know that I came to the United States first time in 1995 when I was 24 years old. I came on exchange program to work in the summer camps, and I came to Michigan where I ended up living. And the camp I worked, first year I worked as a photography specialist. It had a small lake, and one weekend the camp director's father arrived. He had a little pickup truck and a trailer, and he brought a little fishing boat. And he went fishing all day on this little lake. And I was quite curious because I did a lot of fishing back in Ukraine as a kid. So when towards the evening when the guy came back to the shore, I went and talked to him and asked him how was his fishing, and he said, "Oh, fishing was amazing. I caught a lot of nice big fish." So I got all excited, like, "Can I see the fish?" And he looked at me, give me this funny look, and he's like, "Well, I let them go. I just took a couple of pictures." And I remember it was like somebody hit me on the side of my head with a hammer, because the whole concept of to catch a nice big fish and release it back into the water, it's totally unacceptable, unheard of. I was like, my father probably would have a heart attack, just the whole idea of letting fish go. Because in Soviet Union, when we fish to catch and eat the fish. It's not like spend the time and have a good time and then let the fish go and you go home. You actually go fishing because you want to eat fish, and the only fish you let go is a tiny one so they can grow bigger. So that was my first experience with American fishing, and I said I was extremely dismayed, disappointed, just shocked, because like a guy spent all day on the lake and he came back with nothing. He just had a good time catching fish and let it go. So that whole thing just completely, it just didn't work for me. I was very disturbed. So fishing in Soviet Union, I got lucky. Like that's why I keep on repeating that I really enjoy my Soviet childhood. Even I was a city boy. I was born and grew up in Kiev, capital of Ukraine. Every summer I spent in the village in northern Ukraine with my friends, staying at my grandparents, and it was just fantastic. And one other thing we did when I grew older, so when I was maybe 10, 11, we would go ourselves, just me and my friends, and we just fish. We used fishing poles, udочка, but it's just the basic fishing pole with no gadgets on it whatsoever. It just have a long pole, long stick, right, which you cut in the woods. You go and wander around the woods, you're trying to find the tallest, the thinnest young tree that you cut down. Then you trim all the little branches and maybe peel the bark off it, and that's your fishing pole. Then you attach the fishing line to the far end, and the thinner end is better. And then of course you have a what's it called, bobbler, and the floater, little weight, and then a hook. And this is your device to go fishing. So that's what I did most of the time, and my friends just fishing with this kind of primitive fishing poles. And so we go to the river. If we get lucky and grandparents would allow us to use their flat bottom wooden boats, then we can, go a little bit different directions across the river. Otherwise, all we could do is just fish along the banks, just one bank. You just go and try different spots where the good fishing. Of course, no life jackets, nothing like that. We just go there, hang out by the river. So now I'm looking back like, man, that was pretty dangerous. We were young kids. And of course, because it was always happening in the summer, I kind of get used to this recreational style of fishing. So you go there, it's hot, so in your swimming trunks you fish. If it's not a good fishing, you just go swimming and get tan. Or you just, while you're fishing, you in your swimming trunks, so you get in tan while fishing. So this is kind of most popular way of fishing that I did when I was a kid. So what kind of fish we've been catching in Ukraine, in northern Ukraine? I said, this is just this tiny slice of stories about Soviet Union. So there was different fishes, of course, in different areas of Soviet Union. So I want to tell you, when we were fishing with fishing pole, usually most popular fish was verkhovodka, which in English it's called common bleak, like on this picture. So this fish, it's like a little silver fish, and they always kind of towards the surface. That's why they call it verkhovodka. So it's an upper water fish. And it was really easy to catch. There was abundance of them. Since it was pretty skinny fish, people who've been fishing with fishing nets, they never caught them. So there was abundance of that type of fish. And all you needed to do for the bait, you can just use bread. You make a little tiny ball, dense ball with your fingers, put on the hook. And it was a popular bait for the verkhovodka fish. Of course, you can get a worm, but it takes longer because you need to go with a shovel. Of course, we couldn't purchase any bait, fish bait. It's all you need to do it yourself. So then you go and you find spots where worms live, like somewhere by manure pile or somewhere in the lower areas when it's watery, because worms like wet ground. So earthworms will be another bait, but since it was a lot of work, I didn't do a lot of earthworms. Then you can go in the fields and try to catch grasshoppers. That's another popular way of catching fish with the grasshoppers. It's the only way after you catch them, you need to rip their rear legs off, otherwise they hop too much. Or you can have a fly swatter and you just pick the biggest flies and get a bunch of those. That was another successful way of catching verkhovodka on the flies. Real flies, but the problem with those that they were so easy to rip off the hook, so you need to really watch your bobber. I think it's called bobber, right? Poplavok. And otherwise, they can steal your fly in 1 second. So one of the most popular fish we caught was verkhovodka, common bleak. And so what was nice about verkhovodka fish, that common bleak, is that you could catch it any time of the day. Like they were active all day long, because they're floating by the surface of the river trying to get flies or anything else. If you want to get more serious, better quality fish, they need to go fishing like early morning or late evening. But for the kids, of course, we would like to sleep in because it's our summer break. So you just get up, have breakfast, gather your buddies, and then you just go fishing when it's nice and warm, and then you swim and fish and swim and fish and get tan. So that's why that type of fish was most popular. And I could catch maybe 15, 20 of those in a couple of hours. Then you bring them home and grandma will fry them. Usually we fry them on the frying pan, kind of make them sunflower oil, and you toss them in the flour, and that's how you cook it, and it's delicious. Another fish that we caught quite often was plotka. It's a common roach, R-O-A-C-H. This is a better fish. It could be a bigger size. It was a thicker, bigger fish. It was harder to catch. They were kind of more down at the bottom, and they preferred worms. But sometimes we'll catch those, and usually it's kind of considered like a premium fish. So you're excited, like, hey, I got plotka, check it out. And there's another very similar looking fish called krasnoperka, common rod, RUDD. That's also they're very similar, like you need to look careful at them. One just had a brighter red fins, and plotka, I think, had like a greenish top. Otherwise, they looked very similar. I would confuse them quite often. So those would be like our premium plotka and krasnoperka. If you catch a couple of those, you'll be really happy because they had more meat, they heavier fish. And as I said, usually I'll come home maybe with 10, 15 common bleaks and maybe a couple of common roaches or rods. So that's my average catch would be for, 3 hours of fishing on the river. And another fish we would catch sometime, that's a funny one. It's called piscar, and its English name is the gobio or gudgeon, Gudgeon. We really didn't like to catch them, but sometimes if there's no catching, good fishing going on, we'll go to a specific spot, because this kind of fish, it's a bottom feeder, so they're like a little catfish, little tiny catfish type, maybe, but it's a gobio. You only can catch them using a worm. They don't use any other bait, and they like the fast flowing water and shallow. So they would piscar. It's from the word pisok, which means sand. So you can probably proper translation be sander. So this fish likes sand in a fast floating kind of creeks, and they just dig in the sand looking for worms or whatever else lives down there. They were just kind of fun to catch because they really, like if they grab your hook, they start pulling really hard and they fight you hard. So that's more like fun to catch, but they're usually pretty small size fish. I said there's nothing going on and you would like some fish, you'll catch a couple piscars. And some people have been using them as a bait for the bigger fish. So this is the main type of fishes that we've been catching with regular fishing pole. So there's verkhovodka, plotka, krasnoperka, and piscar. So that's usually what we are bringing home as kids. As I said, we'll only let go the tiny ones, so like baby fish we call them. Otherwise, everything else you catch, you bring home. And then I was lucky. My grandma was she will gut them and descale the fish and just fry them. Actually, verkhovodka, the common bleak, was so small that you didn't need to descale them. You just fry them the way they are, and you just eat them whole, bones included. So that was pretty easy. So this is our first part about fishing Soviet Union, fishing with the fishing pole as kids. I hope you enjoy the show, and we'll talk to you soon. Fishing in Soviet Union, Part 2. Hello, comrades, and welcome back to the Ushanka show. We're going to continue our topic about fishing in Soviet Union. I want to share my memories about fishing when I was a kid back in the northern Ukraine. And as I mentioned in my previous video, I had a real shock when I learned that Americans fish just to have fun, so-called catch and release. And when I saw that happening when I came to America first time in 1995, I was thinking, man, it's the same thing like if you meet a girl in a dance club or, somewhere else, and then you invite her home, she agrees, maybe you spend money on her in a restaurant or something like that, or taking her to movies. You come home, you undress her, here she is laying naked in the bed. You look at her and then you say, okay, let me take you home now. I'm done. So that's kind of my understanding of catch and release. You go fishing and you let the fish go. So anyway, so we continue our story about fishing. So back in the countryside, you could tell that people came from the city if they fish with a fishing pole. All the locals, like my grandfather and his neighbors, they were fishing only with fishing nets, which was kind of illegal, I believe. But since we were so far away, kind of like middle of nowhere, was hardly anyone patrolling. We actually had patrols that were looking for braconnier. That's the word for the person who breaks the rules in hunting or fishing, you're a braconier. But all the old guys, old timers, they never use the fishing pole. They just go in the morning and drop the fishing nets in the rivers or creeks or lakes, and then they come back same evening or next morning and they check their fishing nets. But we had one guy, my friend's grandpa. He was a retired school teacher, so he was kind of like a village intelligentsia. So he was the only old person that I knew who was fishing with a fishing pole. And once again, he had a cool, expensive telescoping pole, which was rare thin, not just, skinny tree out of the woods. But he fished only for okun. Okun, or English name for it would be European perch. That was a hard to catch fish. Like, we rarely would catch it. You can only catch it on the earthworm or having some other minnow little fish as a bait. He was going only for that fish, and he would come, use his little flat bottom boat, and he will pick the deepest spots in the river, and he will sit there for hours. So for him, it was kind of like spending time, but he was specializing only in the large size, big perches. He didn't want to catch anything else. He would just put the maximum depth, because perch is kind of like he's not a bottom feeder, it's a predator, but he likes the deep, deep waters. And he will spend all day, if he has nothing going on at his little, call it farm. It's not really a farm. Everyone has a small lot. It was 0.4 acres, not acres, 0.4 hectares. So 40 sotak, 40 100ths of the hectare lot. He'll go and spend time fishing. So he was the only local person who was using fishing pole for fishing. Other way of fishing in the Soviet Union was usage of so-called spinning. And it's funny, it just dawned on me when I was preparing for this video. I was like, oh my goodness, this is actually English word. Spinning from to spin. Because that was a short, flexible fishing rod with the large reel. So now everyone's fishing, they have a small kind of funky shape fish reels on it. And that was a big round, we call it katushka, made out of aluminum. And people usually used spinnings for catching a pike. And pike, the only way you can catch is you have lure as a spoon or spoon bait. So it's a shiny lure made out of metal, usually aluminum or steel. And when you cast it back to you, it's spinning, it looks like a fish, and that's what a pike goes for. My cousin, who came to the village several times, so he was also a grandson of my grandparents, it was his style of fishing. He will just come to the river with his spinning, and he will start just casting here and there, trying to see if he can get the pike hit on that lure. And he may bring one or two every time he does. So that's also be a sign that if you see a person with a spinning, you know he came from the city, because locals weren't doing spinning fishing. And I was told way back when my grandpa was still young, he did the same fishing for pikes with a spoon bait. But since back in, I guess, 40s or 50s, they couldn't purchase spinnings, he would just be on his boat, paddling super fast as he could, and he will have a fishing line in his teeth. So he will drag the spoon bait behind his boat, and he would paddle as quick as he can to make the spoon bait, spin, and then he would feel it. If the pike hits it, it would, yank his mouth, and then he yanks back, and that's how he was catching a pike. So that's how my grandpa was fishing for pike. Another little fish that you could catch using udочка, using fishing pole, would be ruff, R-U-F-F-E, or another name is pope. we call it yorsh in Russian. It looks kind of similar to perch, but it's it's also a little predator, but they don't grow big and they're always really slimy and pokey. So what most people did, yorsh was really good to make uha, which is like a fish soup, but you boil rough first. So you boil just like you put the fish in there, you don't need to clean it, you just boil it, and it gives that really good fishy flavor. And then you just toss fish away, give it to your cat or dog. Then you start cooking that fish broth with good fish, and you add carrots and other things, and it's uha. You don't put potatoes. That's one reason I wasn't a big fan of this fish soup uha, because I like potatoes in my soups, and real uha doesn't have potatoes. But this little fish yorsh, you only can catch it using an earthworm, and as I said, if we catch it, we usually would let it go. So if you're not planning to make uha, you don't want to really use that fish. Another way you could use spinning, so the fishing pole with that big round reel, is so-called перетяжка. I'm not sure how to translate it to English, but the whole idea, you need two people and two spinnings. So you connect them, so you have a common fishing line between them, and then from that common fishing line you have little attached fishing lines with the hook. So it's somewhat like a fly fishing. So what we did, I used, the best would be to use grasshoppers. Or if you can catch dragonflies, there's another great way of using as a bait. So you put the grasshoppers or the dragonflies on the hooks, then one person needs to paddle on the boat across the river on the other side, another bank. And so you stay on each side of the bank with the fishing line between two spinnings. Then you kind of slowly lower it towards the water, and you start dragging your bait slightly touching the surface. And that's when you can catch a nice size common rod and common roach, as well as some other fish like yaz. It's I-D-E, Ide or Ida, yaz. So that's a nice, usually sized large fish, and they usually go for this kind of fly fishing. So this is перетяжка, and I remember very first time when we tried it, we failed really pathetically with my friend Dima. What happened, we kind of like estimated the width of the river, and this is how much fishing line we connected. And then we asked his grandpa to take Dima across the river. So he did that. So Dima's on the opposite side of the river, I'm on this side of the river. We started, fishing, and my goodness, right away we had a really nice size common bleak. Just went right for it. So then you need to reel it one way or other, because, fish is in the middle of the river. Now you need to move it on one of the banks and take it off. And to our horror, we realized that we allowed the length of the fishing line just enough for the width of the river and nothing extra. So we couldn't move one way or another, and we ended up standing there for like a half an hour with that poor fish hanging in the middle of the river. So then when finally his grandpa came back and brought Dima back on this side, we went back all upset, and we had to redo the whole thing to make fishing line twice as long so we can move fish back and forth while doing this interesting kind of fly fishing called перетяжка. Okay, so this concludes the part 2, fishing in Soviet Union. I hope you enjoyed the show. As always, don't forget to put the like under this video, share with your friends, share on social media. Hello, comrades, and welcome back to Ushanka show. We continue our stories about fishing in Soviet Union, and today we'll talk about a little bit different kind of fishing that was popular in northern Ukraine. I did a lot of it being a kid, so let's go to it. As you look at this picture, it's my father to the left, me in the middle smiling carrying a plastic bag full of fish, and my cousin Tanya This picture was taken probably around 1973, 74. So I'm about 4 years old on this photo, maybe 3. And we're just coming back from the river doing fishing. And my dad carries this funny looking device. It looks like a oversized fly catcher, you know, like you catch butterflies. But this thing is actually called plotka. Top touch, it means to stomp. So it's like a stamp or stomper. So what do you do with this device? So it has a net, as you see, it's flat bottom. So flat bottom goes to the bottom of the pond. So you quietly bring this thing towards some kind of weeds in the water, and then you stomp, trying to scare fish into your net. Then you pick it up, and fish is supposed to be there. This type of fishing doesn't work really well in the rivers. First of all, it's deep. You cannot find a lot of decent shallow spots along the riverbanks, and I guess the fish that lives in the river are more sensitive to noise and motion, so they run away before. But the fish that lives in the swampy ponds or little lakes, it's a different kind of fish, and they are not scared of the noise. I guess maybe they're used to different sounds in the water, because cows constantly come to drink water. Sometimes they just go across that shallow lake. So fishes that live in those murky waters, the swamps and lakes, they're not afraid of noise, so you can really catch them easy. You just move your plotka slowly. Usually it's best to fish with 2 people. Like when I used to do it with my friends, we will on each side kind of slowly drag it in the water, then we approach the weeds, and then together simultaneously we start walking around and stomp loudly, trying to scare fish towards the plotka. Then you quickly pick it up, and there'll be a fish jumping on the net on the bottom, and that's your catch. Of course, everything is handmade. Like as you see on this photo of the guy holding, this picture was taken in early 2000s when I went back to the village, and we saw a couple of guys fishing with plotka. So you just need to find, straight little trees and cut them. Then you bend one of the branches. I think this guy maybe had a metal rods on the top there, because they look really skinny and straight. And of course in the background there's that flat bottom fishing boat, also handmade, and a paddle, also handmade. There was nothing you can purchase like that back in the old country, so people had to make all those things. And of course that's the pole that you hold it kind of when you guide your plotka towards the weeds. The difference in the fishing like that is you had to wear clothes while you fishing, because you go in those swampy lakes, little swampy creeks, and besides fish, there also will be a lot of leeches. And that's the main problem. And while you're wandering in that dark, murky water, you don't see the leech approaching you, and they're pretty quiet. Like you don't really feel how they suck to your skin, and then they poke it and start sucking your blood. So the best protection was, when I was a kid, we'll always wear some old clothes, old pants, old shoes. You wear actual shoes, like I had my old Keds, like old sneakers. So you dress up, t-shirt, and you tuck it in. Then on the bottom of your pants, you don't want the leeches to go inside your pants. So you have a little ropes, you tie the ropes to make sure it's tight again around your leg. You don't have socks usually. Then you put shoes, and that's how you fish with your stomper, with plotka. You fully dressed. And then of course we'll have another kid who is just sitting on the bank holding the bag. That's where we're gonna put our fish. Or we'll have some kind of bag, like a net type bag across your shoulders, like a satchel, and that's where you dump your fish after you catch it. But once in a while, those dang leeches will find their way, and then of course after we're done fishing, we come out the water, and we strip, take our wet pants and shoes off, and then we inspect each other because, as I said, those leeches, they could find a way. And then if you find a leech attached to your leg, you shouldn't like pull it out by hand, because same as with what is that bug called that? Oh, they can get you. Forgot the word, klещ. I'll think for a second. I'll tell you. So what happens if you just pull the leech just like that? You can rip it, and its head will remain under your skin, and then it will get, you can get infection. So the best way to get rid of the leech, if it's already stuck to your skin, it cuts the hole in your skin and then works its head under your skin, is you just ask your friend to pee on your leg. I know it sounds gross, but that was the quickest, easiest way to get rid of the leech. Is you ask, hey, or you can try to do yourself, but it's kind of challenging. So you ask your friend, and he will pee on your leg, and that hot urine will burn the leech, and it will wiggle itself out, and you're free, good to go. Sounds really strange right now, but that was the normal way of, you inspect yourself, you see this black, nasty leech attached to your leg, like, damn it, I got one, come on, help me, and your friend will come up and help you, and he'll piss on you. Okay, so I just thought about it. It's same as a tick. If the tick is on you, you need to be really careful removing it from your skin, because it also has the same tendency. You can rip in pieces and have a part stuck under your skin. So just like a tick, you gotta be careful with the leech, because it will create the same problem. Another similar fishing device to taptucha was so-called klomля. But that one, it was way too big for us kids, because it's a really large device. It's usually 2 or 3 adults can handle it, but that one is way bigger, and you can catch way more fish that way. I recall one time watching people fishing in the river, actually, with klomля. There was a wedding the next day, so that's how you get ready for a wedding in the village. Parents of the newlyweds are working on making moonshine, because it's way cheaper than buying vodka, and other people just go and they just fish. So you have some fish for the feast. So I was watching them fishing with klomля, and I was really envy, because that thing is so big, and you can really catch a lot of fish if people know what they're doing. But as I said, I was too small, like when you're 12, 10, you're not that strong to drag this giant klomля. So we only fished with taptucha. But of course, you want to wait when it's a warm day and sunny, because you're spending hours walking around like waist deep in the water. The deepest you go, like chest deep, and you're just trying to scare fish into your taptucha device. And my grandpa made it for us when we decided we want to fish that way. He was very helpful. He sent us to the woods, and of course, you're not legally allowed to just go and cut trees in the forest, because it belongs to collective farm. Proper way would be to go and ask permission from the person, so-called leesnik, who is in charge of watching that forest. But we just snuck in, and he told us what size of small trees he's looking for to make us taptucha. We quietly cut them, then dragged them back to our house, and Grandpa was nice enough to make taptucha for us. And we spent quite a few summers fishing with taptucha. It was pretty successful fishing, but also you catch different fish if you catch with taptucha, because you're not in the river, you're in the lakes and the swamps, which has a different kind of fish. So usually if you fish in the lakes, you will catch karas. English word is karasius, and it can be a golden color or silver color. Sometimes it can be pretty decent size. So that would be a popular fish to catch in the little lakes, because that fish didn't mind stagnant waters, and so that will be first part of the thing that we'll catch. Will be karas. Another one is called leech. English word is tench. It looks like karas. It has like nice goldish color to it, and it's really slippery. Like it has a really tiny scales, and it's really slippery fish, but very delicious. So that was always, if you catch leech, you're excited because it tastes really good. Sometimes you can catch pike. Apparently pike could live in the fresh river water or in the little lakes, and I think it just gets trapped, when in the spring river swallows and they cover a lot of areas, and then fish goes and they drop their eggs. Then when the river recedes, some fish just didn't make it back to the river, so those get trapped. Like pikes could survive, and once in a while we'll catch a pike, but they were way smaller than river pike because they don't have room to grow. And another fish that we will catch, and that is a really different one, it's called vyun. English name is misgarnus or weatherfish. This is a strange looking fish. It looks like a snake. Fat, short, snake, usually black color. This fish is the tough one, and they can live in really swamps. In the winter, they just dig deep in the mud and they sleep there. Even if the water has low oxygen, they can just use their stomach to get oxygen out of air. So they come up to the surface, they grab some air, and they swallow it. It goes in their stomach, and that's how they get oxygen through the stomach. That fish is very delicious, especially if you catch it if they have eggs inside. You just fry it, and it's very tasty. And the reason why it's called weatherfish, you could actually use it to predict weather. They act differently, depends on what weather is coming. So once in a while, if we have a couple little ones, we just leave them in the bucket. And, if they calm, kind of swimming slowly, it means the weather will be good. But if they act crazy, then there is a storm coming, some thunderstorm or something like that. So that's an interesting fish called vyun. And when you catch them, they make strange, squeaking noise. Very noisy fish. And the way the people would clean it, they just drop it in a bowl full with salt, like coarse salt. You just fill it with salt and drop live vyunis in there, and salt burns them, so they just start moving super fast and they clean themselves. It's kind of, I feel bad maybe for that fish, but they can clean themselves pretty quick and then they're ready to go. And as I said, most of the time we just fry them. Some way you just butter them in the flour and they just fry them in the frying pan with sunflower oil, and they're delicious. So that's the way how we would catch fish in the little lakes using taptuha and klomla. Very different kind of fishing, but I won't say I enjoyed that type of fishing because you have to walk in the water, you gotta watch for leeches. But it was pretty productive. We will always get way more fish doing a taptuha style fishing versus fishing in a river with a fishing pole. So there's my another story about fishing in Ukraine. I hope you enjoy it. And as always, don't forget to put likes for this video, share with your friends, and we'll talk to you soon. I got a couple more topics to talk about fishing in Soviet Union. Today we continue our topic about fishing in Soviet Union. And as I mentioned earlier in my previous videos, most local people in our village in the northern Ukraine, I wouldn't call them fishermen. They were mostly like gatherers. They went to gather fish. Wasn't really fishing for fun. Nothing, of course, catch and release. And most of the people, like my grandfather, they used nets. Everything, of course, was handmade. You couldn't purchase anything in the stores. And of course, fishing with the nets was illegal. But because it was so out middle of nowhere village, there was hardly any inspectors. So I don't remember ever problems for my grandfather or his neighbors with their style of fishing. So what my grandpa did in the winter, he would be making new nets or fixing old ones. Also, you couldn't purchase the floaters for your net. So on the top, so your net should float. Those floats, so-called poplovki, it was made out of birch bark. So it was handmade. They peeled the bark of the white birch trees and then they roll it. I think maybe they steam it, then roll it, and it stays in that shape, like a cylinder shape. And that's what they use for floaters for their nets, is birch bark. And then, of course, they had weights, whatever they could get weights. Also was handmade, or maybe they used like a heavy big nuts from some heavy duty equipment. So that was the first style of fishing that my grandfather did, is going in the morning or in the evening, going to the river and some lakes, and he will leave the net, set them in the water, and then next day he'll come back and he will pull the fish out and maybe relocate a net a little bit, trying to catch more fish, or if there was no fish, then he will pick some different location and drop a net again and come back again next day. In one of my earlier videos, I already told you guys the story how my grandparents tried to survive during collectivization in the 30s, in 1930s. It's when the Soviet government was confiscating bread and other crops from peasants. And there's, according to some people, that up to 3 to 5 million Ukrainians died from starvation those years. But mostly it happened down south. In the northern Ukraine, although food was always confiscated, fortunately people had forests around and rivers, so they could fish. Of course, it was illegal, it was against the law. They didn't let people fish. And then they could go, of course, in the woods and pick mushrooms and berries. So that's what my grandparents did. At night, they would sneak out and they go in the darkness to the river so no one see them fishing. And they used so-called bredень. So it's kind of like a fishing net, but it's made to be dragged in the water. So it has like a big bag in the middle and then 2 wings. On each end you have wooden poles that you hold on. And then of course you got floaters on the top and little weights on the bottom. And you pretty much is like a drag net. You just drag it through the river or through the lake trying to catch fish. And what my grandparents did, my grandma was walking along the shore like waist deep in the water dragging the bredень. And my grandpa would be on the boat paddling and dragging same way too. And that's how they quietly fished at night to get some food to put on the table. So that's the fishing with so-called bredень. Of course, it's really heavy. It's really hard to drag because you drag a lot through the weeds and it's all being catched. And of course, you gotta watch out for government officials. And you can only do that type of fishing during the summer or fall when the water's still warm, because you have to be in the water. So that's another kind of illegal fishing that people did. It was bredень. And that it's usually young people could do it, because older folks it would be way too hard. So my grandpa never done it later when he got old. He preferred just the regular fishing nets. Another fishing tool I would call that my grandfather used and a lot of his neighbors. Not everyone fished in our village. Like in that area when my grandpa lived, there was 2 more guys that were fishing every day, and they were kind of like a little bit competing between each other for the best fishing spots. But other people didn't fish that much. So this tool is called neret. And it's pretty much the device with the net that you set up in the creeks or some spots in the water where you think fish is. And also fish will wander inside and get trapped. And then, of course, like in the case with the nets, you go there once a day and you check your neret to see if you have any fish. And I remember I did try that with my friends. We had a couple old nerets from my grandpa, and we tried. It was pretty good, but as I said, it's also harvesting. You just place the traps for the fish, and then you come back and check them out, see if you catch anything. Another tool which is similar to neret was so-called kovsh. And that one is actually made out of thin wooden branches usually of the willows. And that was a pretty complicated to make, so of course it's all made by hand. And those were primarily used to catch viun, that fish that look like a snake. And a lot of times it was used in the winter, that my grandpa will break the ice, set up neret, and then that fish gets attracted because they need oxygen, because everything is covered by ice, and they'll go for air, and they'll get caught into kovsh. But that was I don't know how long it will take to build one of those. And had a plug on one end, so pretty much fish comes from one end and gets trapped, and then you remove that plug made out of like a wad of seaweed, and then you just shake out the fish out of it. So that was pretty interesting, catching fish by kovsh. In middle of 80s and early 90s, there was a new device called televisor. At least it was called in our area televisor, like TV set. The TV, some people call them ekrany or screens. So that's like a mini fishing net. It has a metal rod on the bottom for weight, and then you got a wooden top rod and a floater, of course. And those you just, because they're pretty small, usually a person just cruise around on the boat around the river, and he's pretty much watching. If you notice a bunch of fish in some area, he just starts strategically dropping those televisors all the way around, trying to trap the fish. So those were way easier to handle because, when you work with the fishing net, it's a long, it can be, my goodness, 20 feet long, 30 feet long. So it's pretty hard to carry it, pretty hard to pull out of the water. Televisors, they offer a way easier way of handling. You drop it in the water, then you have a long rope and a float. Then when you're ready to pick it up, you just grab the float and grab the rope and pull the televisor up, and you got your fish. Some people also use this device called pauk. I only noticed that people are doing it a couple of times, usually in shallow lakes. And what it is pretty much another net, and then you have a long pole, which this net is attached, and you lower it in the water. And you might want to throw some bait like pieces of bread or corn to attract fish, and then you rapidly pick it up, the pauk, which pauk means spider, and hopefully have some fish in it. So that was another interesting device. So people will be just lowering it, then dropping some bait, sitting waiting for a little bit, and if they see some motion or fish going for a bait, they just rapidly pick up the stick, and hopefully there's a fish in it. So that's catching fish with pauk, with the spider. And of course, if you do fishing, you need to have a boat, and you couldn't really purchase boats in Soviet Union, so there was a handmade boats, flat bottom usually. And I knew only one guy in our village that actually had a motorboat, so that was very unusual. Otherwise, everyone just, you have your boat parked there at the river. There'll be like a thick pole driven into ground by the river, and then that wooden boat has a chain, so you just lock your chain to that pole, and that's how you leave your boat overnight. And in order to make them waterproof, because it's just the boards connected together, the bottom will be covered with tar. And once you cover it with tar, you want to keep it in the water because it makes boards swallow and they become thicker, and then it keeps the water away. It stays pretty tight. But if you drag the boat outside, out of the water, then boards get dry and they shrink, and then you have gaps. So if you're planning to use your boat all summer, you keep it in the water. But of course, if there was heavy rain, they need to get so-called vitripachka, also handmade out of wood, and you just get the water out of your boat, which we say lotka in Russian. And in the winter, then depends if you are want to make sure no one will steal it. Then you bring the horse, borrow the horse with the buggy from the collective farm, go, ride the horse to the river, load your boat on the buggy, bring it home for repairs, or to put the new layer of tar and store it maybe under the roof, and other people will just leave it sitting. They just drag it on the shore, flip it upside down, and just leave it sitting on the shore till the next season. And as I said, only one person I knew, he had a motorboat, but only one time he gave us a ride. His boat was made out of aluminum, so it was really unusual. And since when you fish and you want to be quiet, so he didn't like to use the motor. The motor was just in his garage, but he would just use that aluminum boat. And it was awkward because, back was wide. That's where you install the engine, motorboat, and the motor for your boat. So that was an interesting guy. But I remember that one time he gave us a ride, and I remember I was so impressed because I was going so fast in the boat. It's the first time ever I actually experienced to be in a Russian speedboat, and that was really neat. And of course, as I said, all this type of fishing was technically illegal. As I mentioned earlier, if you get caught, at least you'll get your nets confiscated. They might take away your boat, and you might have to pay some fines. But I do not recall in our village anyone being caught because, as I said, we lived so out of middle of nowhere, no one bothered because usually those people come by the boat. And it was a really long ride to get to where my grandfather fished. But closer to like Kiev and the big rivers and big lakes, that was patrolled pretty intensively. They also had people helping. For example, there was so-called Голубой патруль. That was the kids that signed up and participated with watching for braconieri, which is poachers, you can say, people who fish illegally. So they just walk along the river shores, and if they see some illegal fishing, they will just report. They, of course, don't want to mess with the adults who do the illegal fishing. The funny thing about Голубой патруль is that Голубой has two meanings, so it's similar to word gay. It used to be, it meant happy, and now it mostly means homosexual. While Голубой has a meaning that means blue, so blue patrol because water is blue color, but also that we use the word Голубой for the gay person. So kind of became more sounding funny later in 90s because when you say Голубой патруль, it's like gay patrol. That's what it sounds. And this is how the badge looks for Голубой патруль. That's what kids would wear on their chest, being a member of their organization. And besides watching for braconieri, the people who fish illegally, in the spring they would walk along the river and watch if the little baby fish will get trapped when the water recedes, and they might just dig the channels and help the baby fish go back in the river, so they help little fish to survive. So, alright, so this is another story about fishing in Soviet Union. Now we got this topic covered. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And of course we had winter fishing, we call it winter fishing, ice fishing. And forgot about that, sorry about that. My father did that. My grandpa, his only type of fishing in the winter he did was going to the lakes and breaking the ice and placing kovsh to fish for that vyun fish that looks like a snake. But my dad did a little bit of ice fishing, but mostly there was guys getting together. They hardly brought any fish back, but had a good time because they had to stay warm, so drank a lot of vodka to keep themselves warm. So my dad was always brings maybe 2-3 fishes, and he'll be barely walking after all day of staying warm with vodka on the lake. So I hope you guys enjoyed this story, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much.